Okay, fantastic.
Hello and welcome to the International Summit Tourism and War. Thank you for being here. Before we start, I would like to ask you for a few moments of silence for all the victims of war, especially innocent women and children. Thank you. Thank you. I give now to our wonderful moderator today, Ms. Nafa. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all attending today's summit titled Tourism and War, an industry that is affected significantly through times of hardship and geopolitical conflict. There are minimal investigated studies, but all literature to date states that wars affect tourism in the negative. Today, we have a wonderful group of tourism partners, professionals, and stakeholders sharing their views on how wars and conflict impact the tourism ecosystem. We will be hearing from each one of our speakers and then allow a 10 to 15-minute questions and answer, and then each speaker will have a closing statement. For further information about the speakers and the Institute for Tourism, please visit the website institutetourism.com. We will first start with today's speaker, Mr. Aziz Abu Sada. He is a peace builder, a cultural educator, an entrepreneur, an author, and an international speaker. He's a winner of many humanitarian awards and has written a book in 2020 titled Crossing Boundaries, A Traveler's Guide to World Peace. Welcome, Aziz.
Thank you, Mana. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for giving us that moment of silence in the beginning, which I think many of us needed before we start this conversation. It's hard to think where to start, because I think we often talk about this topic a little bit too late, in a sense that when a travel industry thinks about our role in time of war, it is a bit too late, because it's what we do before war comes that really can count much, much more. It is where our role as a travel industry to build on peace, to work for justice, to work for equality, to use our platform for voices of those who do not have a platform for their voices to be heard. And so it's a bit sometimes harder to talk about this now, because we are all in the moment, we are all emotional, we are all feeling the pain of people who are suffering from war and from injustice and so on. So I think we have to take just for a second a step back and wonder, what is the work that we could have done often to stop war? Before COVID started, and it's already getting toward that direction, we have over a billion plus, 1.4 billion people travel internationally every year. And if we would have taken enough initiative, I would say, as a whole travel industry, and some do, many don't, we wouldn't get to the places we are today. The greatest challenge for us is lack of communication, lack of knowing each other, ignorance, fear, hatred. And if 1.4 billion people who travel internationally use travel, not just for sightseeing, not just for a beach vacation, not just for a good Insta moment, but rather as an industry that we can use to break through stereotypes, build coalitions, build relationships in places that we wouldn't have otherwise. I truly believe travel could be the best industry for peacemaking. And that's what we need to be pushing for. So it's just important to talk about that before we go into how is the travel industry impacted through war. And how it's impacted today, unfortunately, I see a lot of travel companies, travel boards who have turned their platform into absolute propaganda. And I'm not talking even becoming tribal, which many people have, in the sense, whichever, if I'm from Israel, if I'm from Palestine, if I'm from Europe, if I'm from the US, I will only sympathize based on people's nationality, color, religion, and so on. I will use my platform as a war methodology and a war platform. And that's just so heartbreaking. I work with in different conflict zones around the world. Worked in Colombia before even the peace deal. Worked in close to conflict zones like Oman, which when the war in Yemen started, unfortunately, a lot of people didn't know the geography well enough and assumed Oman will be involved. It destroyed our business there for a few years. But working all these places, and now in Israel and Palestine, I have colleagues in both sides, and I see some becoming very, very pretty much a spokespeople for a government or for what's going on as a company. And we have chosen to go a bit in a different direction. We've chosen to use this time as a way for humanitarian work. We actually have reached out to our travelers who've been to the region and said, here are some needs and humanitarian needs. And it's been incredible seeing the generosity of our travelers, where thousands of dollars has been given. I can tell you today, we were talking to one of our colleagues and helping with some of the Palestinian villages in the West Bank that needed medical support. These are people who've been displaced in the last week, needed some help with food packages. We are not able to really influence the politics, but there's a lot other than the politics that we can do. And I'm saying this as, obviously, I have friends and family all over the West Bank and Palestine that it kills me seeing what's happening. I also have friends in the Israeli side, and I know many of them have been impacted. And there is so much in me that wants to fight and argue and all of that. And maybe on personal level I can, but as a company, we chose to do this differently. And that's a choice we can or have to do. And that's, I think, the role of travel professionals, is to see ourselves more as peacemakers and not only as propaganda for anybody. Again, on an individual level, we can do a lot. As companies, we have to be really careful, and as travel boards, really careful. And it doesn't mean we don't speak again for injustice. It doesn't mean we don't take stands on how to stop war and call for ceasefires and all of that, which we definitely do. But it means we be careful that racism, hatred does not infiltrate our companies. And sadly, I can say I've seen a lot of that going on. For many companies, for many people working in tourism, this is horrific time, because also on a financial level, we just came out of COVID. Many of us already have suffered significantly out of COVID. And now we are hit again. The travel industry is always the first to be hit and the last to recover. So our tours have been canceled. I mean, we have people canceling trips for next summer, assuming that the region is going to be unsafe for that long. And travelers are, often more cautious. So the hit we are getting is significant, not only in Jerusalem, not only in Palestine, in Israel, but even in Egypt, in Jordan. We're having groups who are canceling Jordan. I'm trying to explain to them, it's a different country. It's not unsafe, but I have a tour in Egypt now who are very happy, and yet I have people want to cancel trips in Egypt saying we don't feel safe going to Egypt, even though there is no indication whatsoever. But that's how war works. It scares people from the whole region. I have even people who are afraid to go to certain European countries right now, who are saying, where else can we go outside Europe? That's the effect of war on the travel industry. It's really devastating in the long term, because it doesn't just affect us for 2 weeks, for 1 month, for 2 months. Even if the war ends today, which I hope it does, we would not recover for many, many more months. What do you do in that kind of situation? It's hard. I think there's a damage that you cannot overcome. There's a loss that you will have to incur that will affect your company for years. There's losses that you will never recoup. You can try doing all kind of things. We're trying to do some online programming, which can get you some money. We're trying to pivot to other countries. In the meanwhile, trying to even use some of our guides to do some work in other countries, get some of our staff to do work in other countries. But none of that is really going to be sufficient enough to make a difference. So this is my intro, and I'll just end it with something maybe a bit more personal. As I say all of this, like, again, I might sound detached, but on a personal level, my family is in Jerusalem, and for 3 weeks they have not been out of their home because it's too dangerous to even step outside the street. And I'm not even talking about Gaza, I'm talking about Jerusalem. So on a personal level, you are trying to save your business. You're trying to change things in reality in the world. As you know, your family is living a complete nightmare, and it's extremely hard. And it's true for my staff in Jerusalem, where they feel exactly the same way. They're trying to do so much work to save the business, and in the same time, you dealing with the reality that you're in danger, your family is in danger, and trying to manage between these two things as a travel professional is extremely hard. And trying to stay sane and not hate everybody is extremely hard as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz, and thank you for sharing your personal as well as professional life with our viewers. So let's take it to another coast. We have Mr. John McClough, the founder and director of Fund for Reconciliation and Development, based in the USA, and author of The Intersection of Cuban and Irish Nationalism in the 19th Century New York. Welcome, John.
Thanks very much. And thanks for the presentation we've just heard. I understand your goal to avoid politics, but it's very hard in this moment of history. I want to start out very quickly saying that I think, which people would all probably agree on, that war itself is a fundamental failing of humanity. It is insanity writ large. There is no such thing in my mind as a just war or a good war. Everybody's war is a defensive war. They are always doing it to protect themselves from some other. And wars are, you count the points on wars by the destruction you do to other human beings and to their livelihoods and their infrastructure. So I start from that premise, but on what we normally think of as war, but I actually want to shift to a different kind of war, which is economic, which is where my work has largely been in the last several decades, that has to do with U.S. relations with Cuba and the role that tourism plays within it, just as an illustration of I think the positive sides of tourism and the negative dimension of efforts to stop it. If you follow U.S.-Cuba relations, one of the tokens or symptoms of where they are at any given moment is what the rules and regulations are about Americans visiting Cuba. It's always within the legal framework of an embargo. and definitions of what is permitted and not permitted. The people who are opposed to tourism see it as a way of punishing the other side, of denying them the economic benefits of tourism. But in fact, I think what is important a factor in the attempts to deny tourism is to deny a different interpretation and experience of reality, different narrative. If tourists go from one country to another, especially when there are underlying conflicts and disagreements between the countries, the importance of tourism is that it destroys the narrative of hostility, that the narrative of denial of the humanity of the other side. And so that I think the opposition to tourism is not just as an economic punishment, but it's also as an effort to not have other people's experiences interfere with the official hostilities or the interest group hostilities. Talking about it in a slightly different way, the benefit of tourism is both to the tourist and to the host on the levels economically of economic exchange, obviously, but also on the level of mutual understanding. And so I think that other than situations in which people's lives are at risk, objectively at risk, that anything that's discouraging. I remember we had a big discussion the last time we had this session of Russian tourists and people going to Russia. My view then was, and my view now is, that as there are obvious concerns, particularly if people are grabbed for political reasons, in principle, I think even in moments of conflict where people are not at direct risk, we should be encouraging as much as possible the interaction of sending and receiving countries, or the populations of sending and receiving countries. So if you forgive my initial moralism, that comes out of my experience having worked for years on ending the Vietnam War and then working for normalization, and seeing now that Americans are the largest source of tourists in Vietnam, and seeing that as reflective of the total turnaround of relations between the two countries. I think it's also both reflective of and a motivator of. And so as much as possible, I think if the tourism industry, tourism sector can separate itself from the underlying hostilities, the better it is. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, John. If I may do some housekeeping, if we can mute our mics, just we don't want any distractions. Our next speaker does have a PowerPoint. Michael Nazal, I can either upload it or have you do it, whatever you like.
I'll try to.
Okay. So as he's uploading his PowerPoint, Mr. Michael Nazal is a member of the 25th House of Senate in Jordan and led the tourism sector as the head of the Federation of Tourism Association for over 36 years. He is an investor in hotels and resorts and currently residing in Jordan, Amman, Jordan. So whenever you're ready, do let us know.
I can't upload it, so you must do it for me.
All right. . Can everybody
Well,
see the screen?
I'm sorry
We
for this
cannot
delay,
see the
but
file, we
I can
just see
start.
your screen.
Mm. I don't, let's see here. All right, why don't we just go ahead and start? Sorry for the delay.
I'll start with it regardless. I mean, we don't need the
Okay.
PowerPoint presentation. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm sure in the tourism industry, we're all over the world. So we don't know who's in which time zone, but we're all in tourism. So yes, we are everywhere. Today, we're going to talk about tourism and war, or war and tourism, but being from the land of peace, religion, culture, and history, which is the Middle East. We have lived in this Levant area for many, many years, 100 years of conflicts. The Levant has always been a turbulent region. 100 years of conflicts. I mean, to talk about between war and tourism and war, they are unrelated. They're too related, and we cannot divide them in this part of the world. They are continuously affecting us, affecting our tourism sector, and affecting our lives. I come from a family who has been in tourism as investors for the past 5 generations. And what we have seen, I'm not talking about it as a family, but I'm talking about what we have seen in the 100 past years. In the early 20th century, the Middle East went through the first part of its liberation from the Ottoman Empire. Then we started after that, after World War I, with the Arab-Israeli conflict, which started in 1936 with the uprising in Palestine, in 1948, the creation of the State of Israel, 1956, the Suez War, in 1967, the Six-Day War, 1973 was the war in the Sinai, 2001 was the Intifada between the Palestinians and the West Bank, and in 2023 today, which is the last phase of this series of wars that have affected our tourism. Add to it the Gulf War and its economic impact in 1990 and 2003, the post 9/11 tourism slump, Jordan's 9/11 or 11/9, Arab Spring, that was in 2005, Arab Spring and regional unrest between 2011 and 2016, and still ongoing in Syria. So we really have lived it all. And we know exactly how we go down every 10 years for 2-3 years and try to pick up our wounds and our tourism sector and try to revive it. Our challenges for the sector during the war have always been to maintain our qualified, trained staff during the slump. Of course, the financial burdens we always suffered. The marketing costs to stay alive, to stay online, to stay visible to people. And of course, maintenance expenses to maintain our properties. And in our part of the world, again, interest rates on loans to maintain our operation have been very costly. For example, our interest today is 11%. So you can imagine when we're borrowing to maintain our operation, to pay our staff every month when we have no business, how costly it is. On the other hand, the effects of travel during wars, and here we talk about the tourist. The tourist cost of travel increases due to a variety of factors. The heightened security measures, insurance costs, supply chain disruptions, currency devaluation and economic instability in conflict-affected regions, and airline flights, whether they stay on, whether they're canceled. We have all of those issues that come up during any conflict and every conflict. Also, there are increased costs because of the above, which is the insurance, the flights, and the availability and the accessibility. The increased costs may deter budget-conscious travelers, leading to decreased tourist arrivals in affected areas and potentially impacting the tourism industry overall profitability, if any. What we learned is that the success of tourism development in a neighboring country after a conflict can have significant implications for both the region and its relationship with the conflict-affected country. It is very difficult to bring tourists to an area unless we cooperate together with the country that was affected. I mean, I can see if tomorrow Syria opens up and we have joint groups between us and Syria, that we will have a growth of tourism. When the war in Israel ends up, and if we cooperate together, we'll have more tourists than just trying to sell Jordan alone. So cooperating between neighboring countries, especially those who were affected in the conflict, will facilitate and easily increase the number of tourists arriving to the region. So to promote the regional tourism, we have to encourage tourism initiatives that promote the entire region. And here I'm talking about an area, which is the Levant area, the Middle East, where people mostly come. I'm not talking about the short and medium flights from Europe. I'm talking about people coming from the States or coming from South America or from Southeast Asia. They don't usually like to travel to one country and go back. I mean, they're coming and they'd like to visit 2-3 countries at the same time because it's a trip of a lifetime. They do it once. So we have to have cross-border travel packages, joint marketing efforts to attract tourists. And this is very important because accessibility is not easy. Again, if I talk about Jordan, we don't have easy access except by flights, and flights are scarce. So you have to really use all the region between Turkey, Turkish Airlines, Egypt Air, Israel and Jordan together to be able to bring the tourists to this area and this part of the world. Again, Royal Jordanian would not have enough capacity to bring the tourists, especially when it has high seasons due to Jordanian travel, and it coincides at the same time with tourism travel. And this is a problem worldwide. I mean, flights, and as we've seen post-COVID, that the number of available aircrafts in the world has been limited, and people wanted to travel, and prices of flights went up, of travel went up. So in order to do all of that, we have to build confidence, security, and safety for travel during wars and post-wars. We have to take all the safety measures. We have to be very transparent in information. We have to disseminate information about the region all the time, talking about what's happening and be very clear and informative. We have to collaborate with our authorities. We have to talk about the crisis, the communication. We have to also always not forget that the insurance and the refund policies have to be in place in order to keep and maintain our reputation. Otherwise, we'll lose our reputation if we don't refund people who are too scared to come. During the conflict, as we're doing now, we can use that time to repair and upgrade our infrastructure and superstructure because we have a slump, so automatically we have the time to do our maintenance work and maintain our facilities. We have to continue with our promotion and marketing because promotion and marketing should never stop. Safety and security, of course, is always there, but we should not talk much about it because the minute you talk about it, it means you have a problem. We have to try to be creative by diversifying our tourism offerings. And we have to include the community with their ideas about what else can we offer our tourists. Engaging the local communities to ensure the benefit from tourism is the time when you have that loss, because many people have lost their livelihood, and we have to be very creative in finding them other ideas on how to maintain their livelihood. In conclusion, post-war tourism development in neighboring countries can foster economic growth, reconciliation, and regional stability. Regional stability tourism can play a major role in this effect. Collaboration, sustainable practices, and community engagement are key to success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great information that could be shared across the board. So now let's venture off to Ukraine with Mr. Sergey. He is the founder of Chernobyl Tours. He's a scientist, advisor, a writer, an environmentalist, and leads a wealth of knowledge regarding Chernobyl. Mr. Sergey is the author of 2 novels, Life Force and Chernobyl Comedy. He has published numerous papers, lectures, and studies. Welcome.
Well, hello everybody, and many thanks for inviting me to this important meeting on extremely important topic. I am to add to my introduction that at the moment I also work at the National Museum Chernobyl, which, as it's clear from its name, depicts and presents to the international public the story and the lessons of the one of the most important technological disasters in the history of our mankind. Speaking about the topic of our meeting, I am to just to reflect upon practical experience. For example, during the war, at the initial stage, the National Museum Chernobyl, as a tourist destination, naturally ceased its main activities, receiving the tourists, but instead was trying to protect its the museum and its collection, prepare it for probable evacuation just in case, which fortunately was not necessary. At the moment, we try to continue, on the one hand, to continue business as usual, meaning that we serve our visitors, both Ukrainians and, you won't believe it, also foreigners, because there are still quite a number of foreigners, of tourists in Kiev. On the other hand, we use this period of relatively small number of tourists in order to revise our activities and to prepare the museum and our personnel for important increase of incoming tourism to Ukraine, which we expect to happen after the victory and rebuilding and revival of Ukraine society and economy. Not less interesting is the activities of my other tourist enterprise during the period of war. I mean Chernobyl tour. It just happened so that our main location, the Chernobyl zone, happened to be at the main route of the invaders. And one of our cameras, which were helping, which was installed on our tourist information center at the entrance and exit at the same time from the zone, it happened to be located of the 2 main routes through which the invaders approached Kiev. And so during the first several most important days, we were able in real time online to count at least 1/2 of the invading troops. And of course, immediately this intelligence was passed to our armed forces, and I believe that tourism, and particular Chernobyl tourism, Chernobyl tour, made a valuable contribution into the defense of Ukraine, and specifically of its critical point of the capital of Ukraine. And as not only as an organizer of Chernobyl tourism, but also as its researcher, I was to unexpectedly add one more useful social function of Chernobyl tourism and the tourism as such, meaning the defense of your country against aggression. I would like to reflect that actually peace has huge potential for to combat wars. but unfortunately, this potential is mainly located in two temporal domains, before the war and after the war. Though of course you have just heard that even in case of war, social and technical infrastructure designed for tourism can also serve for the defense of the country. But speaking of the main area of potential, tourism has unique possibility to get people acquainted with each other. You know, it's much easier to kill or to attack an alien described as an evil force than to cause harm to a person, to a place, to a nation which you are already acquainted with, and which has some positive impacts on one's personality and biography and life. At tourist meetings, I never fail. I try not to fail to tell important story of which how the city of Kyoto in Japan was protected from atomic bombardment. Though initially it was at the list of targets, there was one person in the selection committee, then Secretary of War of the United States of America, Mr. Stimson, who happened to visit Japan before and who visited Kyoto and who understand its unique cultural value, not only for Japan, but for the humankind. And there were two occasions when this city was entered to the list of the probable targets. And on those two occasions, Mr. Stimson did outstanding efforts, approached the President of the United States, and made sure that Kyoto was removed from the list and was saved for humanity, for humankind. You know, at that time there were no technical means of air defense to protect Kyoto from atomic bombardment, but it was done just by human factor. It was a byproduct, so to say, by tourism. And this is the potential which all of us tourist professionals need to fully use in doing our business as usual in normal, peaceful times. And by the way, partly reflecting to one of the previous speakers about letting people of the aggressor country to visit other countries because it's good for them. You know, there are different kinds of tourism. For example, the beach tourism very often brings nothing about the culture and the people of the country where the beach is located. You know, and so I am saying this to emphasize that doing tourism, we need to promote not only purely recreational tourism, but there should be always some, you know, cultural addition, you know, some means to get people really positively introduced to this or that culture and nation, to pick up something, perhaps even small, but useful, but pleasant, you know, some recipes, some nice sightseeing, to get outside of the beach ghetto, so to say. And so we need to fully do it to prevent the war. And then tourism has a big potential, rather big potential after the war to heal the wounds of the war itself. And by the way, Chernobyl tourism, which I theoretically founded and then practically organized, happened to be, well, it's not a war tourism, after war tourism, but it's after disaster tourism. So its experience is very useful for the war. And so observing this tourism and studying it, I outlined that it had quite a number of positive functions. It helps to economically revive the affected, the devastated area, like it was with the Chernobyl zone and with the adjacent inhabited areas. It psychologically cures the affected people and communities and areas. It also gives a very symbolic message about, tourism and peace in a way are synonyms. And so when tourism arrives to this or that area, after the war or after the disaster or after a technological accident, it means that this area is safe for visits. And it's a very important message both for the local people and for the international community, for the investors, for the tourists, for everyone. And so this list can be, I don't want to go along this list, but it's very important also to use this post-war, post-disaster tourism, like visits to the Chernobyl zone, like visit to the National Museum of Chernobyl, like visit to the battlefields, as to make, I would use this word, anti-war propaganda. I don't like, I know the negative connotation of the word propaganda, but in this case, it's promotion of intensive aimed promotion of healthy knowledge about how harmful, how disgusting, how anti-efficient and anti-rational is a way of behavior, a way of, so to say, an attempt to solve whatever problems and conflicts, but by means of armed conflict, particularly in the age of nuclear weapons. Well, I would like to stop this, and I will be happy to answer any question and further communicate with this outstanding community. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sergey. I mean, you brought so many interesting topics into play, from conflict, from natural disasters, from you revived a location that many of us would not even think about visiting. So very admirable. We will have time for a Q&A, and please, I am taking some notes in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. Though, let's go on to our fifth speaker from Jordan, Mr. Auni Kewar, Managing Partner and General Manager of Petra Travel and Tourism Company, based in Amman, and comes from a family of tour operators. Welcome, Auni.
Thank you. Greetings, my colleagues from Jordan, the land of diversity, a place of where history, culture, and resilience intersect. As Mrs. Mona said, I come from a family that started the business in 1965, having an office in Amman and an office in Jerusalem until 1967. And then we started with the Holy Land inbound tours from all over the world, mainly Europe. Jerusalem is the cradle of three religions, as we all know. And then wars started, 1967, 1970, and so forth, like our friend Michel stated earlier. First of all, let me speak a little bit about Jordan more than myself. Jordan began by creating a mosaic, a tapestry of culture, historical background. It has always been consistently a top destination for travelers. mainly because going back to ancient times, Petra is one of the 7 wonders, as we all know. It was nominated in 2007, a marvel carved by the Nabateans, as we all know, influenced by the Romans and the Arab Nabateans, and then we have Jerash and others and so forth. The rich history of Jordan comes with its share of challenges. These wars that has been stated earlier affected our tourism, inbound tourism business throughout the past 50 years or more. And it has been a roller coaster situation, whereas we work for a few years and then we get hit hard by these wars. The last one was the COVID 2019 or 20 rather, actually 19, that has affected us a lot. It was the first sector to be hit and the last one to recover, as we all know. We had to survive the challenges that accompanied that. We had to go to the banks to take loans and survive and sustain our companies. It was a very challenging times for all of us. And the blow was so hard. And now when we started to revive again this year, and we were enjoying actually a 38% growth in our business until the 7th of October. And October should have been one of our peak seasons, as always, until November. What happened has hit hard again. So there's always a cloud of uncertainty over the Middle East. Jordan managed always to remain stable and secure. The perceived risks in the region sometimes discourage tourists from visiting neighboring countries and Jordan also. But as we know, tourism is a resilient industry. It bounces back quickly always. But always we are in a dark tunnel. We never know when it ends. Now we are in such a situation where nobody knows the end of this. So this instability posed a significant challenge for Jordan's tourism. As I said, a sector well known for its resilience. Previous conflicts also affected, we'll not go through that. That's a story that we all know. However, Jordan's unwavering commitment to ensuring the visitor's safety and security has always been paramount. And we always try to maintain that status at all times, even during the worst of times. So despite these geopolitical challenges, Jordan has consistently faced and overcome while trying to preserve this rich heritage and characteristics that define our Arab spirit. Our commitment to stability, diplomacy. Jordan has always been a neutral country as much as we can, and having a quest for peace always. It has always been an ongoing narrative. So we are now living through these times, and we're trying to find ways, to maintain or sustain our businesses by maintaining or bettering our infrastructure in the sites. We are trying to train our staff to take advantage of such low season, trying to meet all the challenges that our industry in Jordan has always been facing, mainly 3 challenges. Always shortage of our guides in Jordan with other languages, for example, shortage of rooms in Petra, which is always a challenge for us. Also, shortage of coaches, deluxe. We have had these challenges for the past years. Maybe it's a local issue, but maybe we share some of it with you. So the first 3 quarters of this year, we had about $6 billion tourism receivables in Jordan, and we expected it to double by the end of this year. Okay, so once again, it will not happen apparently. Our main fear now, if this conflict goes on, our next season will be affected, mainly March, April, May, June, because as we know, it's very seasonal business, and this is where all the people working in this industry will be also affected very hard. We are employing now in Jordan in the tourism 60,000 direct jobs, and if you multiply by the multiplier factor by 4, then it's about 250,000 people working in the industry that will be hit hard again. So unemployment will rise again. I'm sorry to look at the negative side of things, but this is a consequence of what's going on now, which we all investors have to look at and study and see what solutions we can do. Maybe we have to reschedule our loans with the banks. We need government support to facilitate all these issues that we are facing during these difficult, challenging times. So, Jordan's story of strength, perseverance, peace is inspiring for the region. Always, we've been a moderate country with our leadership that has always been a moderate leadership that never tried to go extreme in any way, tried to balance the equation as always. So I hope we can, maintain this situation, and I look forward to better times, because the word war is for me and for all of us as a very negative thing to look at, but we have to live through it. I hope we'll get over it soon. Thank you very much. This is, I'm trying to be as brief as I can. I have plenty to say, but I know time is limited. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Auni. Thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of your comments have impacted others in conflict zones. And if I may, I would always like to share Jordan's Switzerland position in the region. So thank you for bringing that up again. Next up, I would like to introduce Mr. Talib Rafai. He's a Jordanian economist who was the Secretary General of the United Nations World Tourism Organization based in Madrid, Spain, from 2010 to 2017. He has extensive background in international and national public service, the private sector, and in the academia world. Welcome, Dr. Rafai.
Thank you so much, Mona. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I want to start by saying we're living in a very strange world nowadays, a world that is filled with so many conflicts, and it's a world that is dominated by certain powers. Now, what I want to say here is the fact that these wars have affected us very much and the tourism industry. Now, what do we mean by that? I think we heard enough from Michelle and Auni to substantiate, but I think we need to also look at the facts on the ground to be able to do something. I always say that travel is one of the best components of peace. I used to say that when I was Secretary General. I said that people that travel, you travel a certain place and have dinner with local people or have a talk with, you can never, ever stereotype them or misunderstand them. So what we need is really a more intensive work of tourism, which is not happening now. We heard what happened in Ukraine, and now it's happening in our neighborhood. The Israeli and the Palestinian. It's quite interesting. Now, don't expect me to be neutral on this. I live in Jordan now, and I am very, very much committed to the cause of the Palestinians. But that's not the reason to get out of logic here and try to keep the logical part ahead. Now, what we must do is we must use the time of peace very much and have people come to visit our lands and our countries, all our countries in the world. Because the more people visit, especially people in powerful positions, like United States, Americans, or Russians, or Chinese, these are very effective people. They should come to visit us. They should learn from us. Because a tourist, as I always say, comes, he shouldn't change. People shouldn't change to please tourists. The tourist must change to please the local people. It's the other way around. So it's important that we always keep that in mind and try as much as possible to maintain our neutrality during war. Now, you heard what has happened to us here in Jordan. We suffered from consequences of something that we have nothing to do with. We have absolutely nothing to do with. But the fact that we're in this neighborhood, we are now paying the price. And you heard Michelle and I, they spoke about their losses and their training problems, their loan problems, many other problems that are there. Now, what I want to say here is we have to all work together as human beings as well, because when we travel, we are not only travelers, we're ambassadors of our own cultures and other cultures. And we have to go back and do something about this world, because the world is a very strange place nowadays. You heard this thing from our Ukrainian friends about Chernobyl. Chernobyl is not far away from us. We are approaching a third world war. And that's very, very disastrous, because we are living in an area and in a time where that's going to happen. I'm afraid so. Now, important thing here is to be able to come together and do some difference in the world. Now, in Palestine, for example, people that come to visit Israel must meet with the Palestinians. They must have dinner with them. They must have chats with them, because that's the only way that they understand what's going on. And if they understand what's going on, they would help us with their own governments, with our democratic governments, as they say. So it's important that we facilitate that. It's important that we facilitate that visitors go and visit the local people, interact with them, because the local people are representative of their own position, of their own culture. And it's important to understand that, because, my friends, nowadays the world is coming to a very critical point. The Russians must stop their war in Ukraine, and the Israelis must stop their war in Palestine, in Gaza, and the West Bank as well. That's very important, because without that, we cannot move any step forward, any step further. And the solution must be to the Palestinian problem, because Palestinians have not come out of this from vacuum. They came out of this because their rights have been denied since 1948, almost 80 years, 75 years now. They have been denied their rights. They have been denied many things in life. I'm sorry to say this, because I cannot be biased by myself.
Yeah, Talib, yeah. We understand. Yeah, Dr. Rifai, we do understand it's very sensitive, and we really wanted to have a platform to share the problems, and we really don't want to pinpoint any one country on this platform. So, but I do understand, travel is a form of cultural engagement, a discussion, as leaders coming to this part of the world to understand the people, to hear the stories, the organic stories. So everything you're saying with travel and peace is essential, and we're all very grateful. So I just wanted to chime in and reiterate your motto of travel equates to peace. Please continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mona, for reminding me of this. I just wanted to admit from the start that I cannot be unbiased. I cannot, because I live in an area where things are happening around us every day, every moment. As we speak now, we're on the television every moment of our day. So that's important. It's important for us to understand this, because visitors to our countries, visitors to our culture have to understand this to be able to influence their own governments. Look what the American Minister of War did with Japan, because he visited Japan. He understood the value of their culture, so he could not take it upon himself to bomb Kyoto, for example. Well, bombing any place is not right. This is the right thing to do. Now we can all discuss this for a long time, but what I'm trying to say here, the war must stop. We must stop this war at any cost.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rifai. I mean, all wars don't lead to anything good. But we are all in the travel space here. Reza brought us together. Dr. Rifai has met most leaders and has embraced and had conversation with these leaders. Us in the travel space are ambassadors for peace, inviting decision makers, inviting friends. The perception of a culture will only be educated while visiting that country, embracing with that culture, dining with others. So everything Dr. Rifai has shared, travel equates to peace, makes sense. We are a travel space here. I want to open the platform for a few questions as we wait for our last speaker, Mr. Francesco. So I see a hand from Mr. Jeffrey Lipman, and then I'd like to take a question from Mr. Peter Sono. So I will start with Mr. Jeffrey and then Mr. Peter, and then we'll see if Mr. Francesco is online. Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Mona. I'm Jeff Lipman, and I'm a friend of Taleb Rifai. We worked together for a long time at UNWTO, and I wanted to take the opportunity to encourage you to pick up on the point that he's been talking about, that there is a place for tourism to get us to understand different people's cultures, and that can produce, over the long term, that can help to produce better understanding between people. But I want to recount a story, and I want to make a point specifically in relation to what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. I had the privilege of going into Ramallah with Shimon Peres and 7 Nobel Peace Prize leaders in 2000, when I was president of the World Travel and Tourism Council. And we went in and we met with the leadership of the then Palestinian Authority in a schoolhouse. And we sat at school desks like children with Yasser Arafat, Hannah Sharawi, Abbas was there, a whole host of these very important decision makers. And this was basically Peres and Arafat who were engaging. And there was an important point I want to make here. One of the points that Peres had in mind, and to some extent Yasser Arafat, because I had another occasion to engage with him in the World Economic Forum, it's the next generation that can make the difference. Shimon Peres wanted to put young Israelis and young Palestinians together and seed fund small social enterprises so that they could learn to work together, to live together, to understand each other. And he also believed that tourism could be an important factor for these social enterprises. So the basic point that I want to make here is, I'm afraid that for most of our generation, it's very hard to divorce yourself from your inbuilt and historical emotions. My father couldn't stand Germans because we'd lived in the UK and there'd been a war in Germany. I have a nice relationship with Germans. I wasn't there. And you could say the same with the Europeans and the Japanese. And last point I want to make here, I think it's the young people. I think we have been served by bad leadership on all sides in this region. And I think the tragedy which occurred on the 7th of October, you could certainly say you could attribute a fair amount of that to the hardline position that has been coming out of Israel since Netanyahu has been in the leadership. Equally, you can see the hardship that the Palestinian people have had when Hamas have been digging tunnels under the hospitals. So, last point, yes, tourism can play a part, but I believe the next generation always, after you've had conflict, because they don't have that same inbuilt emotional hatred that you build up during a war, and which we're seeing at the moment in Gaza. That's it. And it's good to see you looking so well, Taleb. It's a pleasure, always.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Storytelling is so important. Thank you for being very balanced with the story. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Peter Sinone. He's the chairman of the Pacific Asian Travel Association. He is concerned about the potential repercussions of the geopolitical conflict in the Middle East and Central European region on Asian and the Pacific. Would you like to elaborate on that question? Are you on? You're on mute. Peter, you're on mute. It's a great question, guys. He's on mute. It's a great question. Is there anybody else that has, Peter, I can't hear you. Can't hear you. Is there any other question that anybody would like to bring to the table as we wait for Mr. Francesco? Peter, want to give it another try? Okay.
Hello. Ma'am, can I ask something?
Sure, then we'll have Michael. Sure.
Yeah, I am Dr. Santosh Upadhyay from India. I am a tourism professor. How tourism contributing to stopping the war? How can we help the world, humanity to stop these wars? Well, everywhere, even Gulf countries also involved, Black Sea areas also involved in the war, even Indo-Pacific region also involved in some China and Taiwan affected areas. How we contribute to stopping these types of activities?
We can't.
That's a heavy question. Let me give it to one of the speakers. Taleb, I think that's a great question. How can tourism end wars or minimize wars? Any input?
By people visiting other people and forming the right opinion about things. They have to go back to their own countries and influence the things they are doing. That's a very important factor there. People are very important in this.
So in other words, people visiting other cultures will go back and be ambassadors to their country about that country?
That's right.
Can I add something on this? I fully agree with Dr. Taleb. I think visiting each other, but I think it's so much about being informed. Like, I look at people who visited Israel and Palestine, and now I see what they write, whether online, people who I know, people who are friends, and the amount of lack of knowledge, it's astonishing. And even people who visited, because visiting alone isn't enough. You have to engage with local communities, not just a 5-minute conversation, but really meet people who know the place, connect with them, eat with them, ask questions, ask a lot of questions while you're traveling. Try to get multiple perspectives. If you're only depending on your guide to give you the whole history of a place, you're getting a bias.
Talk for me. I'm unmuted.
Bernie, you're not muted.
You're not muted.
So yeah, I think all of that, I can tell you one way I deal with it on some of our tours, and not just in Israel and Palestine,
I
and
can't
other
mute
places,
myself.
is always
Shut up.
is always
Oh my
is always trying to get more than one perspective on every trip. So in Northern Ireland, I try to get a Catholic and Protestant sometimes to co-lead a trip together from the different backgrounds. In Bosnia and Serbia, I try to get a Bosnian and a Serbian to do that. And in Jerusalem, I sometimes get Israelis and Palestinians to work together to try to create a space where you understand really what's going on. You get to hear different perspectives. So hopefully we can get people to be much, much more informed of all aspects of the place you are visiting. And that should be our role in travel as in general, is to bring, like I said, the voices of people who are unheard into the travel industry, and not just make it an industry about leisure, which is important. I'm not saying you take that out, but there should be an element of education and interaction, and not only elements of fun. It should be a mix of both.
Very true, Aziz. Very true.
I see there's a question from Saab Faro. Please mute yourself so we can have the floor for the speakers.
Hi from Bali, Indonesia. Good evening or good afternoon, wherever you're at. So my name is Safaro, and I'm currently residing in Bali, Indonesia. I'm originally from Singapore with Arabian and Chinese roots, but I've been here for almost a decade. Mr. Reza actually invited me. Thank you, Mr. Reza. And I just want to say that, well, my expertise actually lies in global politics, public policy, as well as UN research in island sustainability for the circular economy, right? But for over a decade, I have been dedicated in the lines of spiritual activism, as well as peace diplomacy. So I feel like it's relevant to tonight's speakers have actually touched base on how relevant it is for tourism, and it's actually quite relevant. I did some research work and on how war and conflicts and crises and tourism can play a very important factor in bridging peace diplomacy through wellness programs. So I facilitate as well for trauma patients with I've actually 45 powerful wellness programs in this sector. So I feel that participators and multilaterals in combining tourism as well as wellness. Yeah, I mean, by harnessing healing and collectively, I think we can restore harmony and education. Yeah, and it can also empower the economy sustainably. So I feel like, yeah, to rekindle the collective spirit and dignity of everyone globally, I feel like wellness can play a very important part in peace and in peace diplomacy. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sab. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Michael, and then we'll check on Mr. Francesco. Thank you. Michael Lungo.
Thank you. No, this is a fascinating Zoom. I'm Michael Luong. I've been a journalist looking at this for a few decades in Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, Gaza, Palestine, and other locations. And now I'm at Purdue's tourism school, where I'm doing a dissertation on this topic. And a few things that both as a journalist and as an academic, it's this issue of perception long after a war, which has been brought up, in addition to the destruction of the infrastructure. And in some places it's for decades, and in some places people do want to go back to the regions. But I think this issue with perception, where it can just take decades even after a war has ended for tourism to come back. And fear even of travel editors, some travel editors of mine that will cancel articles constantly. So it just reifies itself, these perception issues. It's kind of just more commentary. I guess the issue is, how do you, if any of the panelists want to mention it, how do you help overcome perceptions, beyond just bringing people to a destination as well? And in a few minutes, I may have to leave because I've got a 10:30 class, but this has been fantastic. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to give that question to Alni, if you're okay with that. Perception and travel. Alni? If not Alni, let's go to Aziz. Oh, sorry, here's Alni, sorry. Alni, the question from Mr. Michael, the perception, he is a journalist and travel writer. The perception of a destination equates to travel. What's your thoughts?
Well, yes, that's a good question. As I stated earlier, the safety of the destination, first of all, is paramount in that case. So Jordan has always prided itself in being a safe destination. That's number one. Sorry, again, the question was.
Michael, do you want to state the question again?
Can you elaborate on your question, please?
So it's really about, so I'm both a journalist and an academic. I'm also at Purdue Tourism School in Indiana. One of the things that I've long found is that a war will end, and it'll still be decades before tourism comes back. Rwanda is reemerging its tourism sector. Bosnia is beginning to reemerge its tourism sector, and that these things just persist long after a war has ended. And sort of, I know on the American side with American media, we're often very afraid to cover former travel destinations. And then as an academic, I'm looking at motivations of tourists to go to such locations. So it's really,
if you allow me,
that's more.
Well, it depends on the source market. If you're talking North America, yes, you're right. But neighboring Europe basically is very resilient. It bounces back quickly because you have to look at the cause of the trip. What niche market are you following? If you're coming for culture and not religious, because religious markets are usually combined with the Holy Land, so that's easily affected, okay? But if you're coming for culture, for conferences, for adventure, for other niche markets, then it's less affected. And Jordan, has always bounced back so swiftly that it takes, it depends on the country also. If you take a German guy who's booking Jordan, then he will look at 6 months. If you take an Italian guy, he will look at shorter term. So it depends on the traveler, actually, how quickly he books his journey. And post-COVID, there is a trend now that people are booking last minute, not like the past. In the past, they used to book 1 or 2 years ahead, but Corona has created a new trend in travel, whereby people look at the situation and book maybe 1 or 2 months earlier than usual. So I think it's been changing. The trend has been changing throughout. So I'm not too worried. The moment it's over, I think Jordan comes back quickly. This is from my 40 years experience in this region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take 2 more questions and then we will wrap up with some closing remarks. I've got a hand from Mr. Gordon Ecotran. please.
That's right. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me here. A pleasure to see many faces who I know supported work I've done before, especially Dr. Taleb, Jeffrey and Louis there from the Institute of Peace Through Tourism. The question I was here to answer today with war and travel is really if we are to look at what we can do in times of peace, as the first speaker said, to really focus on what's going on inside the critical issue of the moment. And this call for a ceasefire in a specific area now in the Gaza Strip, and the relationship to the Olympic truce, which happens every 4 years, and is in fact supported and known by many of you here in this audience, but not by many other people. I did the 2012 London Olympic Games, a short survey. Less than 5% of people know about the Olympic truce. It's a great opportunity for the travel and tourism world to come together. It's the biggest event. Dr. Taleb supported me with an article in the UNWTO publication on peace and tourism when I wrote on mainstreaming sustainability through large-scale tourism events. I do believe now we're going to have this winter of war and we need a summer of peace. And if the industry really did want to come together, it's over something like the travel to the Olympics for the Olympic truce, and really celebrate that truce properly. And I couldn't do it on my own. I've tried since the games, the Beijing Games in China with Louis in 2008, then London 2012, Brazil 2016, Japan 2020-21. It has not happened, yet it's the great chance for the tourism sector, and we need it even more, and to start organizing right now. And like we did in Darfur in the last genocide, we called for a truce in one country. Mia Farrow was spearheading that. If any of you here could get a celebrity or some organization to support a real global truce led by the travel and tourism sector, well, that's SDG 16, the vector of sustainable development being led by sustainable tourism for peace-based green transition economy. That's what we're all doing, I think. And I hope many of you have heard that message for today, because it's such a sad circumstance to come and meet you all under this, in our wonderful industry.
Thank you, Gordon. That was very enlightening. And, you know, possibly some information can be shared through Institute Tourism on the Olympic, on this initiative. So we've got a vast audience. Hopefully somebody knows a celebrity that could assist with tourism and peace. Mr. Gassam, last question, please. Ruhi, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Nafa Nassal, for your question. I want to answer the question, how can tourism end or minimize the war?
How can tourism...
You asked this question from Mr. Dr. Taleb Rifai. How can tourism end or minimize the war? I want to answer this in my view. It's
Sure.
The life experience of human history shows us the nations are either in peace or living in peace or in war. And all of us as tourism professionals, we know that tourism is the economy of peace. And once Mahatma Gandhi told, traveling is the language of peace. And I think we have this responsibility and the potential, each of us as tourism professionals, that we use the language of peace in our communication. It should be an agenda for each person in the tourism industry, and also the agenda for the UNWTO. I believe in the power of the language of peace.
Dr. Taleb, any comments?
No, I agree. I fully agree with Megan. I think he's right about that. It's something that we should really look into very seriously. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. I've got one more question by Birgit. You're going to have to unmute yourself, and then we are going to wrap up.
Okay, thank you, Mona. I've been listening to everyone in comments. The thread that I've been seeing through it, right from the start with Aziz, is the notion of education is so important in travel, is that we're not just focusing on hedonism and hedonistic travel. And again, and then Jeffrey said we have to educate the young people and so forth, have to make sure we bring that in. Now, I always make the point that travel starts before we arrive at a destination, and education starts before we get at a destination. It's marketing, it's the messaging that Kasim just mentioned. You know, how do we communicate?
Excuse me, please mute yourself.
So it needs to be the whole cycle. It starts before, during, and after. So when we try to educate, use tourism as an educational tool, and I've actually published a book, it's called The Way of the Peaceful Traveller, in association with the IRPT, to link with that, to educate people, again, about the peace, travel, over tourism, communication, values, emotions. Nobody does anything. Nobody really teaches about that thing. It seems to just fall to the wayside. You know, we need to work cohesively together to promote the whole notion of peace before people start to be, because there's stereotyping going on. I've written the book when I came back from Dubai teaching there at Zayed University, and because of I was exposed to stereotyping, discrimination, comments like that, all the Arabs and all of that I had to put up with. That is the ignorance that still persists to this day, wherever I've been, whether it was in Europe and back again in Australia. That's just my comment. We need to do more cohesively as an industry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I am a firm believer of education, as like many others. So for the sake of time, thank you so much. I would like to give a big thank you to our speakers, to Mr. Aziz Abu Sarab, to Mr. Michel Nazal, to Mr. Sergi Merhani, Mr. Auni Kewar, Mr. Dr. Talib Rifai, and Mr. John McCullough, all coming together, sharing their views, sharing solutions, and embracing the travel ecosystem for a better tomorrow and safe travels. So once again, I'd like to thank everybody for listening, all attending on other networks, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and for coming together as a unified tourism sector. We all want to travel peacefully, calmly, and enjoy the destination. So once again, I thank you very much for joining us today. Peace be with you. And for any further information, please visit the website, institutetourism.com. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much, Mona, for the wonderful work. Professor Frangeli is trying to log in. He just has some technical issues. He may still even get in. We will see. The recording will be ready from tomorrow. Also, I would like to announce our next webinar on Thursday with Professor Jeffrey Lipman. Did you say about the webinar on Thursday, Jeffrey? Maybe you can announce it by yourself. It'll be better.
Well, thank you for that, Reza. Yeah, I can be very, very brief. We did not believe there was tourism in Ukraine at Sunex Malta. But we have discovered, thanks to the 4 excellent students, diploma students that we have in Ukraine, and 2 of them are on this call. I see Victoria and Maria here. I discovered there is tourism going on in Ukraine at the moment. So on Thursday at Sunex Malta, we will launch a climate-friendly travel chapter in Ukraine, and we'll be doing it with the Institute of Tourism, with Reza, and everybody who's here. We'd really like you to come and to share with us the opportunity that I discovered, and I repeat, I did not believe people would be actually traveling in the middle of this war. but it's happening. We're going to have speakers from the government, speakers from the private sector. All of our students are going to speak. That's going to be the most interesting bit. And we'll try and give everybody the opportunity to participate. And I'd like to thank you, Reza, for giving me the opportunity to make this announcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see also Dr. Lou Damor here. Lou, do you want to say something from the Institute of Tourism, the founder of the International Institute for Tourism, for Peace-Proof Tourism?
Thank you, Reza, for this opportunity. And Jeffrey, I appreciated your comment about the importance of education in tourism and working with the next generations. And I look forward to your presentation on Thursday. I'd like to say that in 2000, I visited a community in Israel which had Palestinians and Israelis living together with a common school for their children. I think that was an ideal situation for preparing the next generations to live together in peace. Thank you very much, Reza, for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if, yes, please.
One sentence? Can I add one sentence only? One sentence.
Yes, please.
I want to add one sentence. We need also an agenda for peace diplomacy in all levels.
Whatever that means.
Was the message clear? You have understood me?
Yeah.
Reza, any ideas about Mr. Ghassan's comment?
He's trying, but he has some issues with his connection, unfortunately. But let me see if that's him.
The message you could listen. You have listened it.
Mr. Frangeli, are you here?
Oh.
Could you hear my message?
No. I think he.
I will write it.
I think he is not here, unfortunately. So we will have his video recording and add it to the website tomorrow. So thank you so much.
Reza, sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
I see Mr. Frangiali here. I can
okay.
see him, but he is an information that the connection to his audio signal is not working at the moment. But I've seen his
Yeah,
face.
he has some.
Yeah, he can't connect, Burkhard.
Mm-hmm.
He can't connect.
Yeah, his microphone does not work.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes.
I must say the tourism sector is extremely flexible and accommodating. Thank you. You're also kind.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think yeah, we cannot wait much more time. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Mona, for the wonderful moderation and all our great speakers. I think it was really interesting and useful. And let's pray for peace, and let's think about all the victims, especially women and children, innocent women and children. And this is happening all the time. And unfortunately, it seems that we live in the real divided world now. So let's wish the best and do our best to have a peaceful world, at least for our children. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Reza.
Thanks, Reza. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Taleb.
Bye, Lou. Bye, Lou.
Bye, Lou.
Bye, Jeffrey. Very good. Goodbye. Good job.
Good
Bye,
to see
Jeff.
you always.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Lou. Good to have seen you.